You live in a world that speaks constantly. Opinions arrive fast, conviction is praised, doubt is mocked, and certainty is confused with strength. In such a world, thinking carefully is not neutral, it is disruptive. Bertrand Russell understood that most human suffering does not arise from malice, but from ideas that are never properly examined, ideas inherited, repeated, and defended with emotional intensity precisely because they have never been questioned. Clarity threatens these ideas not by shouting at them, but by quietly asking what they actually mean. Russell did not see philosophy as a place to build grand systems. He saw it as a discipline of cleaning, of removing confusion, exposing sloppy thinking, and refusing to let language smuggle nonsense into the mind disguised as depth. Russell was born into British aristocracy, a world where authority did not need to justify itself. Power was inherited, institutions were assumed to be legitimate, and tradition carried more moral weight simply by existing. But before those assumptions could fully settle into him, life intervened. His mother died when he was 2, his sister followed soon after, his father was gone before Russell reached adulthood. Death arrived early and repeatedly, stripping away the comforting illusion that belief or status offers protection. He was raised by a deeply religious grandmother whose moral certainty was rigid and unyielding. Russell later reflected that he was taught obedience without understanding, conviction without justification. Something in him quietly resisted this imbalance, not with rebellion, but with skepticism. Russell did not hide his despair. He admitted that there were moments when life felt not merely difficult, but empty. When the universe appeared indifferent and inherited beliefs rang hollow. He contemplated suicide not out of melodrama, but because he could not reconcile emotional suffering with intellectual honesty. What stopped him was not faith, but structure. Mathematics entered his life like a lifeline. In mathematics, Russell discovered a domain where conclusions followed necessarily, where authority meant nothing without proof, and where truth did not depend on belief or tradition. Euclid in particular showed him that certainty could be earned rather than imposed. This discovery reshaped Russell's entire orientation towards the world. From that moment forward, he would demand that ideas justify themselves or be abandoned. At the beginning of the 20th century, philosophy had become grand, ambitious, and deeply abstract. Hegelian idealism dominated, presenting reality as a vast interconnected whole in which everything was internally related to everything else. To many this felt profound, but to Russell it felt dangerous. He saw that such systems often substituted vagueness for insight. If everything depends on everything else, then nothing can be clearly understood in isolation. Science becomes impossible, numbers lose precision, and knowledge dissolves into poetic metaphor. Alongside Moore and Whitehead, Russell led a revolt against this style of thinking, not against meaning itself, but against meaninglessness, masquerading as depth. Russell was especially critical of the doctrine of internal relations, the idea that in order to know any single thing, one must know all of its relations to everything else. He argued that this view makes genuine knowledge impossible. So ask yourself, if knowing one fact requires knowing all facts, how can inquiry ever begin? Science progresses precisely because it allows partial, provisional understanding. Knowledge grows through approximation, not total comprehension. Russell was not denying complexity, he was defending intelligibility. For Russell, Occam's razor was not merely an aesthetic principle, it was a moral one. Every unnecessary assumption creates a hiding place for error. Every extra metaphysical entity adds confusion, not clarity. Russell believes philosophy should remove clutter rather than accumulate it, stripping ideas down into their essential components and asking whether those components actually correspond to anything real. In this sense, Russell treated thinking as a form of ethical responsibility. Russell became consumed by a question most people never ask: what is a number? Not how to use numbers, but what they are. If numbers lack clear foundations, mathematics wobbles. If mathematics wobbles, science loses its footing. If science loses its footing, knowledge itself becomes unstable. He immersed himself into the work of Boole, Cantor, De Morgan and Frege, often retracing Frege's steps independently. It was only later that Russell realised how closely their intellectual paths had aligned, and then Russell found something devastating. Russell identified a contradiction in naive set theory that would later become known as the Russell paradox. The paradox revealed that allowing sets to contain themselves leads to logical contradiction. The famous barber example captures it simply. If a barber shaves all and only those men who do not shave themselves, does he shave himself? The implications were catastrophic. Logic itself appeared unstable. When Russell informed Frege, Frege abandoned his life's project entirely. Russell, however, pressed on. To him, collapse was not failure, it was information. So for more than a decade, Russell and Whitehead laboured over the Principia Mathematica, attempting to derive all of mathematics from logic alone. Draft after draft was begun and abandoned as Russell continually rethought his foundational assumptions. No publisher would touch the work. They paid to publish it themselves. Later, Gödel's incompleteness theorem demonstrated that no such system could ever be complete. Russell accepted this not with bitterness but with intellectual humility. Limits, he believed, do not negate value, they define it. Around the age of 40, Russell shifted his focus from pure logic to language. He realised that many philosophical problems were not deep mysteries about reality, but misunderstandings generated by how language works. Words, he observed, often trick us into believing that because a sentence is grammatically correct, it must refer to something real. Entire debates and even wars have been built on this mistake. In his essay on denoting, Russell demonstrated how phrases like the present King of France appear meaningful despite referring to nothing. By analysing entire propositions rather than isolated terms, Russell dissolved many long-standing philosophical puzzles. What had seemed like profound metaphysical problems were often nothing more than linguistic illusions. Russell developed the theory of logical atomism, proposing that reality consists of independent atomic facts, and that meaningful language should mirror this structure. Yet even here, Russell refused dogmatism. He later doubted whether language could ever perfectly correspond to reality. This willingness to revise, even abandon his own theories, distinguished him from system builders who valued coherence over truth. Now imagine yourself in a room. No audience, no social cost, no reward for being right. Which of your beliefs survive in silence? Russell's philosophy presses this question without accusation. How much of what you believe is something you have examined, and how much is something you perform? Russell distinguished between knowledge by acquaintance, direct experience, and knowledge by description, which includes most of what we believe about the world. Fanaticism arrives when descriptive knowledge is held with the emotion certainty of direct experience. Confidence, Russell warned, does not track truth. Russell believed deeply in science but rejected the idea that it could provide ultimate meaning. Science offers provisional truths subject to revision. Attempts to force final answers where none exist are intellectual temptations, not achievements. Though influenced by G.E. Moore, Russell ultimately rejected objective moral laws. This was not indifference, but honesty. He cared deeply about human suffering and flourishing, but refused to ground ethics in cosmic guarantees. Russell regarded religion as fear made systematic, belief enforced by authority, and curiosity constrained by doctrine. While he distinguished between atheism and agnosticism, his concern was dogma, belief protected from questioning. Russell saw how identity overrides reason, how patriotism anesthetizes thought, and how war becomes morally acceptable through linguistic distortion. He opposed war analytically, not sentimentally. History largely vindicated him. Here are some of his aphorisms as distilled thought. Number 1 is, I would never die for my beliefs because I might be wrong. Number 2 is, many people would sooner die than think. Number 3 is, it is undesirable to believe a proposition when there is no ground for supposing it true. Number 4 is, whoever wishes to become a philosopher must learn not to be frightened by absurdities. And number 5 is, war does not determine who is right, but who is left. Each sentence is a warning. Russell does not offer comfort, he offers responsibility. To think clearly when clarity is unpopular, to doubt bravely when certainty is rewarded, to value honesty over belonging. Precision is ethical, doubt is intellectual strength, language shapes thought, confidence without evidence is dangerous, and clarity dismantles tyranny. An old man, nearing a century of life, still revising, still sceptical, still honest enough to say, I might be wrong. That sentence alone makes Bertrand Russell one of the most dangerous thinkers in history. Not because he destroyed beliefs, but because he demanded they earn their existence.